Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We will get started in just one moment. We're just going to give it a minute for everybody to kind of trickle in. So just bear with us for just a second. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're just giving everyone a chance to kind of trickle in, and then we will get started in just a moment. So thank you all for joining today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the role of plastic credits within a full life cycle approach to plastic stewardship, and appreciate everyone being here. So it looks like we're at 9:01, so let's go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping things. Today's webinar will be recorded and available on the Verra website as well as the Verra YouTube channel later today. The slide deck will also be available on our website, and then everyone who registered for the webinar will be getting a follow-up email with the recording link to the webinar as well as the presentation that we go through today. And we're expecting quite a large crowd, so if you do have any questions, please just keep them on topic, and we promise we will try to get to as many as we can in the Q&A later in the presentation today. If you do have questions, submit them through the question and answer function. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And like I mentioned earlier, we will have a time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, so we'll be sure to address those then. But let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome. I'm Kaylee. I am a Senior Program Officer of the Plastics Policy and Markets team here at Verra, and I will let Kristen also introduce herself.
Thanks. And I'm Kristen Linscott. I'm also a Senior Program Officer that works alongside Kaylee on our Plastics Policy and Markets team.
Kristen. Yeah, so we're just going to start by going over a quick agenda. We'll start by talking about kind of the plastic pollution problem, moving into that full life cycle approach of corporate plastic stewardship and what that is and what that looks like. We'll dive into Verra's plastic program and how it can be leveraged as a downstream solution, some best practices for communications, share a couple of examples of some registered projects that Verra has listed, and then go into our Q&A. And if we're unable to get to your questions again during the Q&A, please feel free to share those questions to the plasticstandard@verra.org email address, which is listed at the bottom of this slide. Cool. So just a quick introduction to Verra. Verra is the world's leading plastic standard, or the leading standard setter for climate action and sustainable development. At present, Verra oversees the world's premier voluntary carbon markets initiative, the Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS program, alongside a comprehensive array of other programs, such as our Climate, Community, and Biodiversity Standard, the Sustainable Development or Verified Impact Standard, and the Plastic Waste Reduction Standard. Verra engages with governments, corporations, and civil society to advance the adoption and responsible use of these standards. There are currently over 3,000 projects spanning across 85 countries worldwide that use our program. So the plastic pollution problem. The escalating issue of plastic waste has become paramount concern for companies, governments, and consumers worldwide. Each year, a staggering 14 million tons of plastic seep into our oceans, with 86% of this leakage transpiring in developing nations. Additionally, over 20 million informal workers globally work to collect and recycle plastic waste. Many are exposed to hazardous and unsafe conditions while striving to clean our environment. Compounding this challenge is the inadequate allocation of funding towards waste management projects. Even with anticipated government commitments to municipal solid waste, it's estimated that only, that an additional $40 billion will be needed between now and 2040 to address plastic leakage. These challenges underscore the necessity for a comprehensive life cycle strategy in plastic stewardship, emphasizing the significance of both upstream and downstream solutions. Focusing solely on upstream measures would only decrease plastic leakage by 65%, and downstream measures alone could only reduce it by 52%. However, an approach that incorporates measures across the full life cycle is projected to slash plastic leakage by 80% by 2040. Oops, sorry. So the full life cycle of corporate plastic stewardship. What is corporate plastic stewardship? Corporate plastic stewardship entails an integrated strategy aimed at reducing plastic use and leakage, which includes both upstream and downstream activities. This approach is also referred to as the systems change approach. Referring to the graph on the right of the screen, we observe the business as usual trend line and the anticipated impact of current commitments on plastic waste leakage. Furthermore, projections for upstream solutions such as recycling, reduction, and substitution, as well as downstream interventions like increased collection and proper disposal, are depicted. However, it's only when we integrate both solutions within the systems change scenario that a significant reduction in plastic leakage by 2040 becomes available. An integrated approach to corporate plastic stewardship begins with measurement, or quantifying the plastic use across the organization's value chain, as well as assessing how much leaks into the environment. Once the plastic footprint and leakage are known and understood by the organization, they can focus on efforts on reducing and managing the organization's plastic waste. Reduction strategies include things like eliminating unnecessary plastic, redesigning products and packaging for reuse or recycling, and increasing recycled content. Management activities involve financing the plastic waste collection and recycling infrastructure to ensure proper waste management. The two activities should happen in parallel to address the both upstream and downstream contributors to plastic pollution. Why is this so important? Well, a company could do everything within its control to redesign products and packaging for recycling, but ultimately, if the waste management infrastructure does not exist beyond their value chain to effectively recycle those products and packaging, they're still going to end up as pollution. Similarly, without proper end-of-life waste management infrastructure, companies may not have access to the amount of recycled content feedstock needed to incorporate into their products and packaging. Finally, the organization engages stakeholders by communicating its waste reduction and management efforts and sharing best practices with others. Throughout today's presentation, we'll dive a bit deeper into each of these components. Starting with measurement. Conducting routine and systemic assessments of plastic usage and leakage is crucial for comprehending an organization's plastic waste impact, as well as identifying avenues for waste reduction and management. Verra suggests that organizations consult industry guidelines for plastic footprint assessment, such as those provided by the Plastic Footprint Network. The Plastic Footprint Network offers a comprehensive modules enabling practitioners to employ the plastic footprint methodology and evaluate their plastic footprint. Additionally, the technical modules provide system maps, calculation routes, and default datasets tailored to various industries. And of course, reliable data is what underpins the accuracy and effectiveness of any measurement exercise a company is doing. Another valuable resource is the Guidelines for Corporate Plastic Stewardship, published concurrently with Verra's Plastic Standard in 2021. The guidelines are intended to be utilized following a corporation's completion of its footprinting process. The guidelines themselves do not aid in measuring or footprinting. These guidelines furnish best practices for responsible plastic stewardship and offer direction on utilizing plastic credits to establish credible commitments and objectives. We should note the Plastic Footprint Network referenced earlier intends to update these guidelines in 2024 to synchronize them with the latest insights on plastic pollution, target setting, and mitigation. Transitioning into reduction and management phases of one's corporate plastic stewardship strategy, it's crucial to adhere to best practices that expand upon the existing guidance, such as the guidelines we referenced on the last slide. These practices include things like setting targets in accordance with the latest scientific insights and adjusting them as global frameworks for target setting and mitigation become more harmonized, ensuring that activities within and beyond a company's value chain are separately accounted for and disclosed on a regular basis, and recognizing the importance of integrating both upstream and downstream solutions to achieve a circular economy. Reduction in plastic use is paramount, but it must be complemented by effective waste management as well. In a few moments, I'll introduce one of the solutions that corporates can use to fund the expansion of plastic waste collection and recycling. And later in this presentation, we'll speak about how these investments can actually bolster the impact of upstream strategies as well. So now let's talk about Verra's plastic program. Before diving into how plastic credits and how Verra's plastic standard can support an organization's plastic stewardship strategy, I'd like to take a moment to offer a more comprehensive introduction to Verra's plastic program. The program offers corporations an exceptional opportunity to enhance plastic stewardship by investing in downstream solutions. It encompasses the plastic standard and the accompanying methodologies for plastic waste collection and recycling. The plastic standard serves as a consistent framework for measuring and monitoring project impacts and integrating social and environmental safeguards. Additionally, within the plastic program, projects have the capacity to generate plastic credits. These credits, certified under the plastic program, are issued to projects that have undergone third-party audits and enable corporates to finance initiatives aimed at establishing and expanding plastic waste collection and recycling infrastructure. So how does Verra's plastic program catalyze and scale plastic collection? Well, the diagram illustrates some key elements relevant to Verra's plastic program and the resulting plastic credits. Verra serves as the standard setter for collection and recycling projects. Accredited third-party auditors evaluate compliance with the standards and confirm the outcomes of collection and recycling efforts. Subsequently, Verra examines project documentation and audit reports, issuing 1 plastic credit for every ton collected and/or recycled beyond baseline rates. After plastic credits are issued on Verra's registry, businesses have the opportunity to procure plastic credits, enabling them to make reputable investments in plastic waste management. This credible investment enhances the impact of plastic waste collection and recycling projects. Some key features of Verra's plastic program include the additionality requirement. This ensures that a project activity demonstrates the collection or recycling of plastic waste is beyond what would have likely occurred without the project. There's also the incorporation of social safeguards, necessitating project proponents to confirm the absence of adverse impacts on the natural environment or local communities, including informal waste workers. And lastly, an independent third-party verification that assures compliance with all standard requirements for the projects is required. The program covers all 7 types of plastic and composite materials containing plastic. Moreover, a variety of project activities are eligible under Verra's plastic standard, including things like recovery of ocean-bound plastic, development of municipal or private waste collection infrastructure, collection through waste pickers or the informal sector, and the operation of mechanical recycling facilities. So a bit more on plastic credits. Plastic credits serve as an investment mechanism for financing global plastic waste collection and recycling projects. Each plastic credit represents the collection and/or recycling of 1 additional ton of plastic waste. These credits bolster waste management efforts by facilitating infrastructure development and expansion. Moreover, they enable projects to enhance worker livelihoods, health and safety standards, while also complementing upstream targets and action. There are 2 types of plastic credits available under Verra's plastic program. The waste collection credits. These credits are issued according to the amount of plastic waste collected and properly managed, exceeding what would have occurred without the plastic program project. Collection credits enable organizations to invest directly in collection plastic waste from the environment and establishing systems to prevent further pollution. Waste recycling credits are credits issued based on the amount of plastic waste recycled, surpassing what would have happened without a plastic program project. Recycling credits help facilitate the scaling of recycling infrastructure and the generation of recycled plastic feedstock that can substitute virgin plastic. I'll now hand it over to Kristen to share with us ways in which Verra's plastic program and plastic credits can help support organizations in their corporate plastic stewardship strategy.
Thanks. So Haley has laid the foundation for why corporate plastic stewardship needs both upstream and downstream interventions. She also provided a little background on the plastic program and how those credits associated with it can be used to make investments in waste collection and recycling that sit beyond a company's value chain. But we know that plastic credits are still quite a new concept for some. So we're going to spend a little time speaking to the complementarity of credits to other plastic avoidance or waste reduction solutions and highlight a few of the benefits of having plastic credits certified and issued by a program like Verra's. To do this, we've framed the next few slides around some common questions we get from corporates. The first being, we've alluded to the fact that investing in waste management infrastructure through credits can complement upstream objectives and goals, but some might ask how. And I think one of the best simple examples is to consider that many companies, thanks to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, have goals around post-consumer recycled content use. And we're seeing that these can be quite ambitious, and they're actually very challenging to meet due to some of the supply and pricing realities that exist today for recycled feedstock. So this is where we want to make the connection clear that investing beyond your value chain can actually support activities within your value chain. By buying a plastic credit, you can help to scale recycling infrastructure in regions around the world, thus increasing the global supply of high-quality recycled feedstock. And more supply means that more recycled material becomes available, and those upstream goals around recycled content can be made more achievable. This demonstrates also that credits aren't meant to be offsets or replacements for within value chain intervention. In fact, they're really enhancements or complements to other actions that a company is taking upstream. On the next slide, we've seen some companies have already demonstrated leadership by investing in various collection or recycling initiatives. And the methods for doing this are varied. Some might plan and organize their own projects or contribute to different funds or partnerships aimed at increasing collection or recycling rates. The problem is that these different strategies across business units or regions can create complications for measuring, monitoring, and reporting on the different results. There are benefits to opting to invest in projects certified with the plastic program instead. First of all, these projects have all been third-party audited to an independent standard, which can give you peace of mind and reduce some of the administrative time that you may have spent vetting or planning a potential project or partnership. And if you're a CPG brand, you don't need or want to become an expert in waste management. By purchasing verified credits, you have a less resource-intensive route for supporting these activities, and you can also reduce some of the risks associated with taking on those projects directly. This allows you also to spend more time on the upstream levers that you have within your value chain, rather than navigating the complexities and specifics of waste management across the world. There's also a few benefits on the measurement and reporting front. When resources are all pooled, maybe into a fund or a partnership, a company might be able to speak about the amount of money they've invested, but not necessarily the results, whether that be the amount of waste collected or waste recycled. Credits allow companies to make specific claims about their contributions, and these claims are then supported by units, which are listed and retired on a public registry. And lastly, we can't underscore the value of the framework itself. Having a consistent way to measure and compare the impact of these beyond value chain investments is valuable, especially for those companies that operate in multiple markets. Maybe they're reporting, they have different regional units, all reporting up to a central global unit. By having this framework, it harmonizes the means of accounting for these contributions, while still allowing projects to be designed and customized to local needs. And I should highlight that while today we're going to be putting a lot of focus on plastic credits, the plastic standard and the supporting methodologies can be used as just an accounting framework for those companies or initiatives that want to measure and account for the impacts of their collection or recycling that they're engaged in. Another thing we know is top of mind for companies are the social risks that are inherent to recycled plastic value chains and waste management in general, especially in those regions where the informal sector is involved. We know companies are conscientious about where they're sourcing their raw recycled materials, and they also want to ensure that for those projects they do support, they don't expose them to any additional social or reputational risks. All of the projects certified with our programs have to make significant considerations for the social and environmental safeguards within their projects, as well as conduct a robust stakeholder consultation and engagement exercise. A project using the standard has to do the exercise of identifying vulnerable stakeholders, consulting them at the design of the project, creating a system for continued consultation throughout the implementation of the project. And then, of course, Haley also alluded to those social safeguards. These require projects to mitigate any negative impacts of their activities. So a project cannot include forced or child labor. They have to make considerations for fair and equitable compensation. So that means paying those actors involved a regionally prevailing industry wage, and also considering if there are any income displacement results of their activities, they need to counter those by creating other opportunities for income for those affected. And of course, there's a lot of other elements to this today, so we're just kind of skimming the surface, but projects also have to consider what kind of access to health and safety equipment their employees have. Are they being properly trained to avoid any unnecessary risks? And a project's conformance with all of these requirements will be audited by a third-party validation and verification body, or a VVB, not only at the inception of the project, but over each period the project issues credits for. Okay, I hope everyone's still with me. I know there's been a lot of information on these slides, but there's just a lot to say. The next topic we wanted to dig into is, a lot of people say, great, this sounds good, but voluntary investment alone is not going to be enough. Like, shouldn't we just wait for extended producer responsibility regulations to address what's downstream in our value chain? You're certainly right. I think everyone or most people agree that EPR will be required to achieve systems change in terms of plastic pollution. But landmark reports like Breaking the Plastic Wave have emphasized that voluntary and regulatory levers will be required to achieve that goal of 80% reduction in plastic leakage by 2040. We need both, and I think that's clear. We know that, unfortunately, while EPR is a great tool, it does sometimes take a long time to agree on. And even once signed into law, it can take years to implement and yield results. Whereas plastic leakage is happening as we speak, and it's not going to slow down while we wait for EPR to develop. And even more important, there are extreme health and environmental costs associated with the plastic pollution that's happening today. And we think businesses have a responsibility to invest in action to help us reach those 2040 goals around plastic pollution and plastic leakage. This is where the plastic program can provide that pathway for immediate and continued voluntary action while these policies are being formulated and implemented. Along the lines of EPR, a lot of people ask, well, how can we use the plastic program in regions where EPR is already in consideration or under force? And this is where we can point out that plastic credits, specifically those issued with our program, can serve both voluntary and regulatory purposes. For example, as we just discussed, In regions with EPR in consideration, plastic credits can be used as a way of directing voluntary funding to those activities while the EPR policy is being finalized. And then once EPR is actually enforced, credits can be used in conjunction with mandated regulation to demonstrate your ambition of going above and beyond what's required. For example, you might already be meeting your compliance obligations, but may decide to use credits to invest in projects that have other social benefits, or maybe you want to invest in projects managing plastic materials that aren't within the scope of the regulated scheme. We also should remind you that, credits provide a route to expanding and building the capacity of infrastructure, which is not always covered within the way EPR is modeled today. So for those companies that really want to see these additional capacities come from their investments, credits could be another complement to EPR. And then finally, there's the scenario where plastic credits could also offer a pathway for complying with EPR that has been put in place. Some may be familiar with the way the Philippines has done this. Their EPR legislation gives companies the option to purchase plastic credits as one of the means for meeting their targets. This may be preferable for some companies as it gives them a little more autonomy to decide what types of projects they support in meeting the given legislation. And credits can also work in tandem with or in place of the more common producer responsibility organization or PRO model. We know the trade-off sometimes with the way PROs are organized is that the companies paying into the PROs lose a little bit of visibility of what their fees are going to. They might not necessarily know how much of their contribution is going to plastic waste collection or recycling activities versus administrative costs or overhead. And this is just another example where embedding credits could help increase the transparency around the results of funding different collection and recycling activities. And the last thing we wanted to touch on is, the plastic credit market, we've acknowledged it's still somewhat young, and people want to know what's the value of purchasing credits that have been issued to projects that have been third-party audited to program requirements like Verra's. This program is the product of an extensive multi-stakeholder development process, and the standard and methodologies will be continually updated to align with industry best practices. By serving as an independent standard setter, Verra offers the plastic credit market a credible and transparent benchmark for what a plastic credit is. We aren't involved in developing the projects or the transaction of the credits themselves. Our interest is in providing a trusted framework for assessing the collection and recycling outcomes of these activities across the world. And we've seen, fortunately, the benefit of this framework being applied in practice by projects all across the world, and look forward to seeing even more projects use it. As we wind up this presentation, going back to that measurement, reduction, management, and communication kind of outline that Kaylee provided earlier. We want to speak about how plastic credits can be used to communicate about a company's contributions towards waste management as part of their greater plastic stewardship strategy. So on this next slide, a company's communication about these contributions will likely vary depending on where they are in their own plastic stewardship journey. But we know that greenwashing concerns are top of mind for many and are very important to consider, which is why Verra emphasizes that any communication about plastic credits should use clear, transparent language that's compatible with the role of plastic credits. For example, some terms like plastic neutral or offsetting don't really align with using credits as part of a broader strategy focused on the full life cycle of plastic. A plastic stewardship strategy can't forego upstream interventions and rely on downstream contributions like credits alone. Plastic has to be addressed across the full life cycle. And plastic credits can be used as a compensation tool. So this is where a company might measure their plastic footprint and then make a corresponding environmental claim, such as net zero plastic to nature or 100% recycled at end of life. These are two claims that are outlined in those guidelines for corporate plastic stewardship Kaylee outlined earlier. But there's also growing consensus to move away from, too simple of compensation claims like neutrality. And this echoes a parallel shift we're seeing in other markets like the carbon market. Thus, we see plastic credits are also purchased by the public and private sector as a means of addressing plastic pollution and investing in projects that contribute to reducing it without necessarily claiming compensation for a plastic footprint specifically. On this next slide, we've shared one example of how a company might communicate about their contributions. So this is something that might appear in maybe an ESG or impact report or on a website disclosure. And if I'll just quickly read the example, a company might say, we have implemented X, Y, and Z activities to reduce the use of our plastic upstream. And in addition, we've purchased 400 waste collection credits and 600 waste recycling credits certified with Verra's plastic standard in 2023. And they could then go on to describe, what that 400 tons or 400 credits and 600 recycling credits actually represent, that being, 400 tons of plastic waste have been collected or 600 tons of plastic has been recycled, thus really expanding and enhancing the capacity for recycling in a given region. I haven't read it all, but I think you can see from that second paragraph, this claim is very specific and it offers a lot of information about the investment to be as transparent as one can be. And the registry is one of those cornerstones for transparency in the plastic program. It enables a lot of detailed claims about like what we saw in this last slide. And that's because every plastic credit listed is visible on the Verra plastic credit or Verra registry. Each credit has a serial number that offers information about where the project took place, the material types collected or recycled, the end of life used by the project. And this is publicly visible, allowing companies to align their purchase with their own priorities and goals for beyond value chain investments. And once a company has used a credit to make a claim, they can retire it on the registry, signifying that it has been used and is no longer active, and thus prevents any future double claiming. They do have the option to disclose, their name or organization publicly on the registry, but this is just an option. Regardless of whether they associate themselves with the retirement on a more public-facing way, they will receive a retirement certificate. And this certificate can back up any claims about collection or recycling that they make in their website or ESG report. I should mention that the registry includes information beyond just plastic credits. All the projects that have started the process of registering with the plastic program are listed on the registry. All of their associated project documents and audit reports will be uploaded to this public registry for anyone to see, so they have a better understanding of kind of how this project operates, the elements to it, but also what stage they are in the registration process, whether that be, that they're under validation or maybe they're undergoing their public comment period. All of these things, though, increase the transparency about the projects that are registered or plan to register with our program. And now I'm going to hand it over to Kaylee to talk about, I think, what gets us all excited is some examples of a few projects that are using our program today.
Thanks, Kristen. So I know we've covered a lot of information today, so hopefully this will be a bit of like a fun break and getting to learn about some of the projects that are registered under Verra's plastic program. So Verra's plastic program was launched in February of 2021. We just celebrated our 3rd birthday not too long ago. And there are currently about 50 projects that are listed and then 6 that have actually registered. So I'll go through just a couple of examples of some of the projects that we have registered thus far, starting with our Dakali project located in Senegal. They concentrate on expanding local capacities and infrastructure to curb the spread of plastic waste in streets and public areas. The project also recycles plastic into chips, replacing virgin plastic in regional manufacturing, and establishes a household-level plastic waste separation system. To date, the project has collected over 3,000 tons of plastic waste and recycled more than 4,000 tons. Another project is the Conceptos Plasticos projects in Côte d'Ivoire. It focuses on empowering women waste pickers from the local community. The project offers wages above the prevailing industry standard, creating reliable income opportunities. It also provides training for employees on various aspects, including things like plastic collection hazards, proper lifting and stretching techniques, and disease prevention. Furthermore, the collected material is reprocessed into plastic bricks used for constructing schools as part of UNICEF's school building initiative. And to date, they've collected over 220 tons of plastic waste. Another project is located in North Queensland, situated in Australia, and they specialize in collection of agriculture waste from banana farms. And this waste is delivered to mechanical recyclers or landfills and is really helping to reduce the instances of burying, burning, or leaving waste to enter the Great Barrier Reef and surrounding waterways. To date, the project has collected about 32 tons of plastic waste. And the last project I'll just touch on is the Second Life project in Thailand. And they've gathered over 3,800 tons of plastic waste and recycled 306 tons. This project funds the sorting and collected fishing nets, invests in regional initiatives to enhance recycling practices, and offers a premium to collect waste from the hard-to-reach islands. And then I'll turn it back over to Kristen to close this out.
Thank you. I think talking about those examples bring a little bit more meaning and life to what we mean by beyond value chain investments or plastic waste collection and recycling. All of these projects are going to look very different depending on the regional needs and industry context for where the plastic is coming from or the material type itself. But I think there are some common costs that we see to waiting or delaying action relevant to addressing plastic pollution. Today, we know that only 71% of plastic produced is formally collected and less than 15% is actually recycled. And it's projected that without action, the annual flow of plastic into the ocean could nearly triple by 2040. Meaning 29 million metric tons per year would be leaking into the ocean. Others have said that delaying implementation of larger scale systems interventions could add 80 million metric tons more to the ocean. So we know that action, both upstream and downstream of the plastic value chain, is needed today. And there are costs to act, waiting to act. which just further emphasizes the need to be engaging in upstream interventions that can address plastic pollution at the source, but also considering what exists beyond your value chain in terms of waste management and making investments to bolster this infrastructure in the regions that are relevant to you. If you think that plastic credits are a tool that would complement your own plastic stewardship strategy well, we encourage you to start by reviewing the projects listed on the Verra registry. You can see what projects and what regions have started the process of registering, and you can also see those plastic credits that have been formally issued already. As we mentioned, Verra does not sell these credits. But if you are interested in the projects or credits you see on the registry, you can get in touch with the projects directly to discuss opportunities for supporting their collection or recycling efforts. And there are also brokers and intermediaries that work in the space who might be able to help you connect with those projects that align best with your own plastic stewardship priorities and objectives. And lastly, we wanted to take this opportunity to highlight the work of the Plastic Footprint Network one last time. They'll be building on the work that they did around plastic footprinting last year to focus on target setting and mitigation this year. Interested companies will be able to potentially engage in a pilot exercise that they are conducting to kind of test this integrated approach to plastic stewardship. So if this is something that's of interest to you, you can get in touch with the PFN directly. But I think more broadly, we would just encourage you to look up their website and follow their work, as I think they're doing a lot of great things in the coming year. With that, we are ready to close our presentation and start answering some audience questions. I know that was about 40 minutes of talking, so we really appreciate you listening, and we've seen a lot of engagement in the questions. So we're going to do our best. Kaylee and I will just share in answering some of those that have come in. Haley, do you want to start maybe it's always the $1 million question, the one about the price of plastic credits?
Yeah, absolutely. So given Verra's kind of unique position as an independent standards body, Verra is not actually involved in the pricing, buying, or selling of plastic credits, nor does Verra track the prices of plastic credits. However, I think we do expect the price to vary based on a variety of factors, such as the location of the project, the end destination of the plastic waste, material type and format, project activity, the social impacts of the project, but ultimately that price will be determined by the market.
I see another, or kind of a handful of questions related to general like market projections or demands for credits. I think this might be a good one to answer now, because along the lines of what Kaylee just mentioned, since we aren't engaged in the transaction, we don't track or make projections. First off, I think this would compromise our kind of independence as that standard setter. But generally, I think as we see the market evolve, there will be more resources. I know somebody asked if there are any companies or NGOs that have started to track and quantify the plastic credit market in terms of like the scale, pricing, volumes, growth, similar to the way others in the carbon market, like ecosystems marketplace, have done. I don't think there aren't any examples of this yet, but again, this is just our standard. It's only 3 years old. The carbon market has many years ahead of us. I think we anticipate similar things coming about if plastic credits kind of scale and are used in the way we anticipate. We know that there is this increased interest around plastic stewardship from consumer pressures, but also regulatory and global conversations like the Global Plastic Treaty. So this interest around looking at how we can tackle plastic pollution across the full value chain is, I think, going to remain relevant. And we hope that plastic credits can be used as part of that larger toolbox. Of course, the plastic credit's not going to be a solution for something upstream. But in looking at the plastic problem or what pollution comes from just the downstream element itself, credits and the investments in waste management that they facilitate can be a useful part of that strategy.
And I see several questions, Kristen, about the recently announced plastic credit bond by World Bank, Citibank, and Plastic Collective. Do you want to share a little bit about the bond and how it's utilizing plastic credits and how that kind of pertains to the work that Verra is doing?
Yeah, this is, I think, a great example of where I think the value of our framework and certification program has been acknowledged. Verra is not or was not directly involved in the organization of the bond. This was undertaken by those involved, those parties that Kaylee just mentioned. Basically, the projects, though, at the center of this instrument will be receiving upfront financing and using plastic credits to pay the plastic credits will be used to pay the coupon as part of the coupon payments for the bond, which to us is exciting because, for one, I think getting back to measuring the contributions, having this framework is very helpful in instruments like these because it allows people to see what the results are, which are especially relevant to an outcome bond like this. And then we are also, I think, excited to see how plastic credits, which I think on their own are a great finance mechanism, how those can actually integrate with other innovative mechanisms for thinking about how to scale and fund waste management infrastructure in different regions. So hopefully we'll see more examples of these outcome bonds, and I think we'll learn even more about how they work. For now, I guess what Verra can say is our standard is the one that's being used to assess these outcomes, which is great. I see one other question about somebody wants us to elaborate on double counting, and specifically between like a credit and the material that it's associated with. I know we get these questions a lot, especially in the realm of waste recycling credits. And people ask, well, how is a waste recycling credit different than the recycled material? And how are those claimed? Like, they wonder, is that double claiming? And the answer is no. And this really just comes down to what each of those are representing and how they can be used in claims. So recycled content or recycled material and the content attribution of that would be used to make claims about recycled content higher up in or within a company's own value chain. Whereas a waste recycling credit really represents that a company is making an investment in recycling infrastructure beyond their own value chain to help expand and grow the capacity to recycle plastic waste. So these are distinct. A waste recycling credit will never and should not be used to make claims about recycled content. It's not, that's just not how it works. And it's really meant to signify the investment that a company makes in recycling infrastructure.
And I see a couple of people asking kind of, do Verra plastic projects require proving additionality? And so yes, all of our projects do have to prove additionality for kind of more specifics on how this is applicable for maybe a waste collection versus a waste recycling project, in the waste collection methodology, as well as the plastic waste recycling methodology. Section 7 really dives into a stepwise approach and methods for demonstrating additionality for both of those types of activities. And so I would just probably reference you to those documents and that specific section to understand more about the requirements of additionality, depending on which activity you're thinking about.
Thanks. Now we have maybe a few more minutes for questions. Another really simple one to answer is somebody asks, are there certain criteria for the third-party auditors or what are the certain criteria that third-party auditors have to fulfill to be recognized by Verra? This is also set out in our program requirements and on the website. And basically, they have to show accreditation with a national accreditation body to an ISO standard that's referenced. They need to show that they have experience not only in auditing, but also social auditing and the subject matter at hand. So waste management, plastic waste collection, recycling, and they provide all that evidence to Verra, and that is assessed, and we will either approve or deny those auditors that can conduct assessments under our programs. And this list is kind of constantly updated as new applications are received, but that's how it works. We do approve those VVBs that can conduct audits under our program, but the VVBs are independent of Verra. Verra is not conducting the audits. What we do is once the audit is complete, at the time a project requests registration, or maybe they're requesting plastic credits for a given monitoring period, we conduct a review over the project documents and audit documents to ensure that they all meet the requirements we've set out in our standards and methodology. Let's see, what else? Oh, do you want to take the question about claims certification, Kaylee?
So I think someone's asking, does Verra certify the claims? And no, the plastic standard is used to certify the projects that issue plastic credits and not the claims. However, Verra does include requirements in the plastic program guide surrounding the type of claims that can be made about projects using the plastic standard, as well as some best practices for plastic credit end users that I think Kristen had said earlier in the presentation.
Great. I think there's one last question we can maybe take today, and then we'll wrap it up. Somebody asked about kind of Verra's alignment with other plastic-related programs, such as the Global Commitments or CDP's plastic in terms of accounting methodologies. As of right now, I think a lot of these commitments, they might not directly align with our program because they have, they're more considerations for what a company needs to do, whereas our standards are relevant to the project. But with that said, I think it's a good opportunity to share that we are always tracking what is happening in the market around plastic stewardship, plastic goals, whether that be mandatory or voluntary ones, and we'll be considering, how our own program evolves with those. Continuous improvement is a key principle for us. So we will continually update our requirements to align with not only the latest data and science, but also just trends around addressing plastic stewardship. Yeah, I think that is great. We, again, had a ton of questions. We just cannot get to all of them today. After the session, we'll go through all of them. And if there are any that we didn't get to that we think would be to everyone's benefit to see, we will try to either publish the Q&A on our website, or you'll see them incorporated in a future website FAQ.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for attending. If you'd like to learn more about Verra's plastic program or do have any additional questions from today's session, please do email us at plasticstandard@verra.org, and we will try our best to answer those offline. But thank you again for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.